I've been doing product management consulting and coaching in the private equity sphere for over a decade. Jim Milbury and Devin Matthews, when they were at Chicago Growth Partners, took me from my instructing at Pragmatic Marketing days and gave me the opportunity to work with a handful of their portfolio companies. And I'm forever blessed for the ability to do this. And there's been a conversation, there's been a product conversations I've been wanting to have for as long as I've been doing these, and that's 4 years, 200 some of them. It's a panel on private equity and product management, because I remember having conversations with private equity partners a decade ago talking about product management, and they said, Grant, we buy companies with a long runway and we don't need product management. And I still feel like that long runway needs product management. We need to understand, how do we keep iterating and growing and adding value to the company. And just this week, Product Growth Leaders published an ebook on why we think product management is the next great private equity value creation thing. So we timed that publishing with this panel. And so I'm so honored and blessed to have Jim Milbury, now with Parker Gale, Hitesh Anand, formerly of THL Partners, and Annie Asrari from Excel KKR. Ben Johnson, we were hoping to get on from LLR, and Ben's been sort of, along with Jim, my two key product people in the operating partner realm. LLR has been an amazing partner. Hopefully we'll get him on in a future date. But, wanted to just have this conversation. Let's understand from those firms who have invested in product as an operating partner value creation thing, why is it? So we're going to start. I'm going to let each of the panelists introduce themselves, sort of tell their backstories of how they got to this role of being an operating partner in product. And then we'll go into some key questions about, why do they think there's value in this? Why is their firm investing in this type of stuff? So with that said, I'm going to actually do it in the order that they joined me. So it's also the order that they're lined up in my screen. So Annie, I'd love to have you introduce yourself and talk about how you got to be here as an operating partner or operating consultant. I'm not sure the terminology Excel KKR uses, focused on product.
Thank you so much, Grant, and thank you for having me on your panel. I'm super excited about talking about product management, which I'm very passionate about. Very quick introduction. I started my career in software engineering. I spent the first 4.5 years of my career in software engineering. My undergrad is technical, it's computer engineering. And then after the first 4.5 years, I transitioned into product and sort of grew up in product. And I've held every level role in product management, as you can imagine. In my last operating role, I was the chief product officer for a SaaS company that we exited to a strategic. And after that, I got to meet a few folks from Excel KKR, and I had the good fortune of joining them after about 6 months. So I have been doing the operating partner role for just over two years, and I lead our product function at AKKR.
Wonderful. And it's such an amazing team you guys have there. I remember meeting Rachel Spasser like a decade or so ago, and the people who came in to help do that at Excel KKR, just it's a tremendous. And it's so great to see private equity firms investing in this value creation and operating partner type thing, at least in the consultative way. Next, my longtime friend, Jim Milbury. Why don't you give us a little background, Jim?
Sure. So I spent the first 20 years of my career working for software companies, either running pre-sales teams or engineering teams, a variety of roles for ERP software companies, database companies. I worked for DEC right out of college. People are going to have to Google that. You youngins probably don't know what Digital Equipment Corporation is. So I run venture-backed teams, large corporate teams. I ended up working for Oracle in the late 90s for the Dark Lord himself. And one of my old bosses pulled me into a private equity backed company out of Chicago that the legendary Ellen Carnahan had invested in, and we had to find a home for it. And I helped her find a home for it. And, Mike was rich enough that he didn't really want to work anymore. And Ellen asked me if I wanted to be her Renfield to her Dracula for a few years. And that's how I got pulled into it. And then subsequently, we rolled out from William Blair into Chicago Growth Partners, and then Devin and I rolled out of Chicago Growth Partners into Parker Gale in 2014.
And if you couldn't tell from the accent, he's from Boston. The fact that he worked for DEC tells you everything you need to know about the fact that he's from Boston.
Well, it was mandatory. It was like a mandatory military service growing up in Boston. It's like, so if you had to do 2 years at DEC before you were allowed to leave the state, I think,
especially if you're a technology engineering type background. So
exactly.
And what he didn't say is actually Jim and Devin started the PE Funcast, back in 2013? Yeah. And so probably one of the first, if not the first podcast in the private equity space, especially my favorite one, because I've been on it a couple times, but some amazing content through the years there. I hope people can check it out. And finally, Hitesh Anand. Yeah, Hitesh, why don't you give us how you got here?
Thanks, Glenn. Jim, I know DEC. I was a former semi-engineer in my prior career. So I think similar backgrounds, right? I out of college, engineer, was a double E, build semiconductor chips for Motorola Android devices, and then transitioned to the business side in strategy, corporate strategy, internal venture, and then into product management. So I came kind of circuitous route into product management, but then subsequently I worked in big companies such as Nokia, Citi, helped launch the Apple Wallet for Citi, smaller companies like Verifone, did a few startups based in the Valley, have failures, learning from failures, and one success, exit, acquired by Visa. And then after in the exit to Visa, was when I was looking at things, and THL wanted to bring on board somebody who could help them look at companies from a product lens, both from the diligence perspective as well as from post-diligence value creation. So that's my background. I came into this PE space not by intention, but by I say, it's like crossing a river. I'm a hiker. Like you cross a river and you look back, is this the right way I crossed? But I did cross, right? So I did cross.
No, I think many people do that. And actually, I'm going to add to my list of questions if we get to it. I'd love to understand the balance between how much of it is in due diligence and looking at and scouting the people who come in versus helping with them. Most of my questions are about helping it once they're in the portfolio, but if I can get to it, I will come back to that. And, when you call Verifone a smaller company, it tells you the size of companies you're used to working in, because I think of Verifone as a pretty big company. Yeah. So the first question I want to start with is sort of a basic one. Why do you think product management is an important capability for a private equity portfolio company to have? What is it that it brings?
Well, I think in our case, it depends on what your portfolio is, right? So we're a small focused fund, so we only buy founder-owned software businesses or the occasional carve out, from a larger company. And almost always in a founder-owned business, and there's a little bit of survivorship bias, right? It has to be successful to get to any PE firm, right? If plenty of them go out of business, we never see it. But if it gets to the point where it's worth something, and they want to sell to a PE firm or another strategic, they've had some level of success. But we have found that at the point of inflection where we're looking at them, the founder still thinks they're the best salesperson that company ever had. And they still act as kind of the product manager, because in a lot of cases, the founder came from the industry and said, hey, I got a better way to do this, and built the company over years, and probably used a lot of gut and instinct to get to where they were, right? Which got them to this successful point. But it's a real inflection point for us. What took them to that, what got them there, is not going to get them to the next level. And that's part of the challenge.
And so bringing product management in is trying to help with that scale to make it more scalable beyond just that founder.
Yeah, because the founder's idea of product management is go on a sales call. The prospect, complains about some feature you don't have or something the competitor has. You run back to the office. You tell all of engineering to stop what they're doing and to, wrangle this thing together for this prospect who may or may not buy it, and then move on and rinse and repeat, right? And that just simply doesn't work, particularly when it may actually work fine when you're literally building the first product on behalf of a few customers, but it doesn't work when you've got several hundred customers in a real market. It just doesn't work anymore.
No, completely and totally. I love that.
I think Jim hit it spot on. So I'll take two lenses to this, right? One lens is the smaller companies where this problem is when you're scaling up, you're moving beyond the founder, you're scaling up, you're bringing product management as a function in the organization, a repeatable function that gives you the outcome that you want to make this a business, right? How to connect the dots. That's one set of problem. area. The second set is you have a company that has been around for a long time. They think they are doing product management, but actually what they have is they have a feature factory. They're building feature after feature after feature, which does not translate to economic success, doesn't translate to more sales, doesn't translate to more competitive growth. And so how do you change the mindset of adding more features to step back and be more oriented towards the outcome that the customer is looking for? Sometimes removing features is a better outcome, right? So building that discovery muscle, bring that muscle in, or reinventing that muscle is where some companies need product management focus as well.
I think in both you and I want to get to your second point on that. You had a second lens you were going to go to, but I think you and Jim both, it brings this whole idea about the market versus the individual. N equals many versus N equals one. And often you have that N equals one in this scale up, to Jim's point, was successful, that got to an exit. That person's probably has generational wealth now who did that. But to keep it going, once you've got a few dozen customers, 100 customers, you need to look at the market and where the best investment is for the market versus the best investment for company A or company B. So that's what I see a ton when we're working with these companies, is about building in that capability. Your second lens, was it a bigger company?
Yeah. So what I'm saying is, in bigger company, some of the PE, and this is what I've learned over the years, right? Some of the PE investments you make in mid-market companies are not very successful, plethora of reasons. One of them is that they don't have a repeatable process across. A very good playbook across the PE world is sales. How do you optimize sales? How do you optimize go-to-market? The same focus also needs to be on engineering and product management. So the simple metric, when I talk about why do you need product management, it's like, you want to invest X million dollars or X% of your budget. What is the outcome ROI that you want to achieve? To achieve that ROI, you need some predictability and you need some way of making decisions. That is why you need product management. So it's about the ROI.
I still have written, and I'll get to you in a second. I still have written, you can't even read it because my lights are too bright. This is my notes from my last call with Hitesh. And he said the 4 questions he asked the CEO: what are you releasing next quarter? What's the impact of that release to your top line? What's the ROI of the release? And what's the lifetime cost of the release? And I just, if we can start getting people thinking that's, to me, I still keep it on my desk because I knew I was going to have this call, but it really resonates with me. So thank you, Hitesh. Annie, if you want, you can double down on something somebody's already said. You can give something new. We're very good at yes and it and go improv. So
I'm going to yes and it. I absolutely agree with everything Jim and Hitesh said. And I do see that with our portfolio companies as well. The small, the large, the small one being founder led and founder thinking they are the product manager or acting as the product manager, and the larger one, not being disciplined in the art of product management and just working on a ton of features. So I fully agree with those two. I want to add something here, and that's around how the PE world is changing and why product management is becoming much more critical, right? When we buy a new company, we fundamentally believe that we can organically or inorganically grow it. Inorganic means that we can buy add-ons and put it together and grow that company. Product management, one of the responsibilities of product management is to do build, buy, partner analysis and be able to have an opinion about what is a right add-on for us that's going to perhaps increase our geographical reach, give us an adjacent buyer or market, and help us grow. So whether we want to grow this company organically or inorganically, there's a huge need for product management. Now, let's say we go and do an add-on. We really need product management to do the product strategy and figure out what's the go-forward platform. Are we going to integrate these platforms? Are we going to migrate customers? And if so, what's our migration strategy? Are we going to end of life one of our products? So end of life becomes, one of our it's part of product management. You have to figure out the end of life strategy. So gone are the days of just financial arbitrage. And now if we do add-ons, we have to figure out, is this going to be a win for us, and how are we going to deal with it in the future? That's kind of my take on that.
No, I love it. And I've got I'll call him a mentor, a guy named Frank Tate. Frank was the CPO and then CSO, Chief Strategy Officer at Frontline Education, Frontline Technologies, helped them scale it up and sell it when they sold it to a larger, a larger private equity firm. And when I was talking about this same exact topic, he said the key was we need to define our market map, right? What are the market segments we want to play in and the types of problems we want to solve? And that should give us a roadmap of what types of companies do we want to buy, or where, if there's a white space in that gap, where we build organically. And so often, at least when I grew up, product management, those were the type of conversations I was having with leadership. But so often I see people with product management titles just stuck in the delivery realm of it, and sort of being separated from the strategy thing. So I'm excited to see how you guys are viewing it at Accel KKR. I think we've hit some of these. The next question I was going to look at is, what are the most common product management problems you see in a new portfolio company? So obviously not having formal product management, but I'm thinking about, we don't do good with market segmentation. We don't do good with personas or understanding the problems, or to Hitish's point, we are focused on, we're a feature factory that doesn't understand outcomes. So I'd love to get, when you go in, you're doing your first triage, what are the most common things you guys are seeing?
I mean, I think we often see the confusion between markets and market segments, right? And we're big Jeffrey Moore crossing the chasm folks, right? Like we believe that model, right? And there's lots of great parallels for all of our companies. Yeah. One of the things we see that gets often confused, though, Grant, is market segments are what you're really going after in outsized companies, not markets. So we'll have a portfolio company that sells a really good solution, let's say, to for a market segment of 100 to 200 users. I don't care what it is. Software to run dental practices.
Attorneys. That was actually the example we used.
I always use that
10 years ago on our podcast, PE Funcast.
Right. Then our CTO, we hired a CTO for Dealer Builders, now the CEO, who ran a dental practice management thing. So he keeps correcting my math there. So use that as an example, right? Let's say you've got a great product that sells really good to a dentist office with a medium-sized dentist office, right? 2 to 4 dentists. And then I'm going to go to 100. No, it's a completely different market, right? So people say, hey, we're going after the dental market. No, it's broken up into segments. And so that's one of the first things is we'll have portfolio companies that want to sell sell a much bigger solution, or take features out and try and sell a low end solution to capture market share, when those are they have completely different market dynamics, right? It's not just because it's in the same end market, it's not. The segments are very different. And that's a big problem for us. And it's a big problem.
TAM to SAM, right? That's a huge difference.
Yeah, and your ability to actually go after that market. So, if you've been selling a low-end solution for 10 years, and now you're like, hey, I think we're going to go sell the Cadillac.
Yeah.
Based on what? How are you going to get from A to B? That's a very difficult path. And why? Why are you doing that, right?
No, completely. I love that. Hitesh?
Yeah, I think the same theme in what I call is continued product market fit, right? When a company exists and reached a point, they have achieved product market fit for the product that they are selling. But software, and if you're talking about software companies, even service-oriented companies, product market fit evolves because problems change, competitive solutions change. So are you continue to achieve product market fit? That is the lens that a lot of companies, a lot of founders, a lot of teams miss. Like, we were great in that market segment, as Jim said, but that market segment either has expanded, or a horizontal solution has come in and we are struggling and we don't have continued product market fit. How do you achieve that? That is one of the biggest drivers of needing product management, is because you're going back to the basics, first principles of discovery, and listening to the customer problems. One of the things I tell the teams that I work with is, I don't care what your product is doing. Do you know what the customer or the user is doing before they come to your product and after they leave your product? Because that is where the immediate opportunity is. It's not the shiny object on the right quadrant where 10 other venture-backed companies are fighting for. It's the immediate, what I call the smallest strategy. Don't forget, yes, we are going to do the biggest strategy. The smallest, that is where the focus is, and that's where the focus of product management comes in the PE-backed world.
Oh, completely and totally. And I think both in my head, I'm looking at both what Jim's comments on crossing the chasm and the bell curve there. And you're talking about sort of the product market fit evolving. And I could see that even at a minimum within the stages that Geoffrey Moore lays out. But I think even I've got a graph somewhere in one of my presentations where it's a bell curve with a whole bunch of small S curves on it. And it's like that each release is its own S curve. You're targeting a new problem to solve or a new adjacency and that type of stuff. And the before and after the product, there's an incredible Harvard Business Review article from Dick Harrington and Tony Chian from back in probably 2008 or 2009 about how Thomson Reuters, it was before the Reuters acquisition, so how Thomson started shifting from a newspaper company to a content-enabled workflow company. And that was exactly what they did. They called it front-end customer strategy FEX. And they went in and asked the question, what are you doing 3 minutes before you use our product? What are you using 3 minutes after you use our product? And they redefined their personas and their workflows, and it redefined how they identified organic and inorganic opportunities. Thank you, Hitesh. Annie, what are the problems you're seeing? Again, and I'm going to let you go first next time, so you're not having to yes and.
Well, I'm going to switch it up a little bit. I'm going to actually respond to this question with a lens on the product management org, right? So I certainly agree with everything Jim and Hitesh have said, but I'm going to slightly pivot and say the problem that I see is, on some of the smaller companies, the function doesn't exist at all. Or when it does exist, we confuse product ownership with product management, and we think that our responsibilities as a PO is the same as that's all of our responsibilities. Basically, we participate in agile ceremonies and we are prioritizing our backlog, and we spend 80% of our time internally with our engineering partners, and we think that's all of it. That's product management. I want my product management folks to have a GM mindset. I want PM as GM mindset, and that's what we talk about a lot at our firm. We want product managers to think like P&L owners. We want them to reassess their ideal customer profile. We want them to keep a close eye on their competitives.
Wait, reassess? They actually had them?
Yeah, that's a miracle of Fatima right there. Like,
Yeah.
I apologize.
Helped a few with that. We do run those projects, and we do help a little bit internally with that. But the other thing I want them to do is to classify and reclassify their products and where those products sit on the product lifecycle. Is it a nascent product? Is it a growing product? Is it a mature product? Should we decline it? Think about the BCG
matrix
4 quadrants.
Yep.
Is it a pet? Is it a cash cow? Is it a star? We have to classify it and reclassify it every year if we are thinking like a GM. And then
no, completely.
We're going to invest in these product lines. So my challenge is the absence of that kind of thinking, because a lot of us grow up as product owners and we kind of stay in that area. And quite frankly, there's a lot of work there that to keep us busy 8 hours a day. And that's perhaps why we are not thinking broader.
Yeah.
I don't know how many of you guys follow John Cutler, but Cutler had a post last week, I think it was, where he's like, the reality is if we get back to what product management, what many of us think it should be in this GM role, there's a lot less product managers than we have now. And that's really bifurcating this, who's doing this product owner delivery manager role versus who's truly being the GM of the business.
Yeah. But see, I think, and you hit it on the head. There is this whole notion of what I call product management theater. Like you see a company like, yeah, we are great product managers. We do agile ceremonies. We do, stand-ups, and we do retros. And so this, one of the simple questions I ask is, okay, do you know the usage of your metrics? Oh, we don't, right? That brings back to the whole notion of, are you a GM? Do you know the feature usage dropping or user usage dropping? No, we don't, right? Do you know that your investments and your roadmap, do they align? Meaning the current number of users in the roadmap investment, are they aligned? No, we don't. So that is what I call product management theater, which exists in almost all companies. And so the lens that I try to tell people is like, you start with strategy. You need to have the right strategy, which simply means looking at the strategy. You can tell, out of these 10 things, I'm going to deprioritize 8 and focus on 2. And the 2 is in this order, because this will achieve the product strategy that's tied to the business goal of retention for this year, for example, right? So that's the first thing. Second is, do you have the people, not the org yet, because org can be varied. There's no one size fits all. Do you have the people, the right people for achieving that strategy, and people along, not just product design and engineering, and right. And there's this new notion in the Valley, which is, I think, far yet in the PE world, of product engineers, where you don't need to tell your engineers everything. You tell them the idea and they're able to invent it. And so the second is, like I said, the people. Third is the process, which is where a lot of people focus on product management. And that is important, but not as critical unless the first 2 things are in place. So process can be very varied across companies. Google's process can't be applied to the PE world, for example. And then the last comes the tools, which is where some of the companies are lacking. Do you have the right tools to get insights? Like, do you know your Zendesk can flow into Jira, and do you have the right model of looking at customer problems and focusing on retention as an issue? So those things, to me, are the basics, which are more often than not don't exist, or exist in a very unsavory form, so to speak.
No, and I'm going to break the fourth wall here for a second and shout out to Mei Wong. If you've ever seen the panels, Mei's on almost all of them. She runs some of them. And she and I have this theory that every single panel conversation we have comes back to one of 2 things, if not both of them, and it's product strategy and product operations, right? And even in a PE thing, it comes to that. So I wholeheartedly agree. It's like, you need to get those are the yin and yang of doing the right thing and doing it right, right? Are we focused on the right stuff? Do we have the strategy, and do we have the ability to deliver on that strategy? And I think, if you can get those, you're in great shape. Jim, I wanted to sort of take this product management theater, or agile for agile's sake, question to you, because I know you've had to deal with that in the past.
I knew this was coming, because I'm an anti-religious. I tell you, the first thing I will say, just slightly pivoting a little bit, Grant, is that we see this all the time with Hitesh, you sort of reference jobs to be done, like what is the customer doing 2 minutes before, 2 minutes after, right? Yes. And I always use the Dollar Shave Club and Harry's Razors example, right? That when I don't know which one came first, and I don't care, but I think it was Harry's was first and said, hey, we bought our own German steel factory and we have the best razors in the world for the best price. Okay, maybe that's true. And then 6 months later, they got shampoo. What the hell do you know about shampoo? Nothing. And we see this problem all the time. It's like, guys, you're a portfolio company of doing this. You may decide you want to do this, but you don't have the expertise, you don't have the skills, you don't have the capabilities. And we see this all the time in you talk about theater, it's hilarious. The agile theater, like, our velocity's up, but we lower revenue and we haven't delivered any products, but gosh darn it, our velocity's up, which is ridiculous. I think you hit the nail on the head that, Grant, beyond this, there's the other piece of this. If you follow the Jeffrey Moore, that, we've had portfolio companies that did a really good job from a product standpoint of talking to prospects and customers, and they hit the right, we're going to have the right product that serves a real need, engineering delivered on time. And then I'm in the meeting, and the first question I ask is, well, okay, so what are the sales and marketing materials? How has sales been trained on how to demo this? Have we done a pricing analysis? And you get the RCA dog, their head starts to go like this. They didn't think about any of those things. So it's whole product management, and it's, it's really hard to build beyond the original pieces to the end. But, we see this, this agile theater all the time. And, if I see somebody who's basically a dogmatic, agile scrum person, it's not going to go well. Yeah, because it never does. They're making the theater over the actual end result, right? And that just it never works.
And in those cases, it's not even the output. In many cases, they weren't even doing outputs, let alone outcomes. They just were doing every single stand-up and every single education. And obviously, there's a specific portfolio company I'm thinking of that Jim knows exactly who I'm thinking of.
Well, it's like it's like the what is it, the Simpsons episode, the white paper. You know, they're treating all these. Even the Agile folks themselves said we made half this stuff up. We had to pick like 2 weeks. And we thought, how long should a sprint be? I don't know. 2 weeks sounds good. And these people treat it like, you know, on the seventh day it was said unto them that the sprint shall be 2 weeks. Yeah, it's ridiculous.
Yeah. So let's shift a little, and Annie, I'm going to put this right at you, just so Jim or Hitesh doesn't jump in, and you get a chance to get your thoughts out first before, and they can do the yes ands. Situation: you guys hire a new product lead at a portfolio company, or you acquire somebody who has a decent product lead. What is your advice to them? You know, now you're a product leader in a private equity company. This is totally different than, especially if they come from a bootstrapped realm. What is your advice to a product leader to understand how to survive and thrive as a portfolio company of private equity?
Yeah, so actually I can answer that in a few bullet points. Number one, do an audit of your product portfolio. Understand what's there, what's missing. And when I say product portfolio, and do an audit, it means look at what categories you play in, what's strong, what's weak, what do you have to build, what can you acquire, where do you need to partner. So basically build your product vision. That's number one. Number two, find out who's your finance partner. Become friendly with your finance partner and start to create your product P&L. Some of our companies do not have per product P&L, and this hurts our decision making. So find out who your finance partner is and go become, take them out to coffee, become best friends with them, because you're going to need their help. And then number three is be prescriptive about your investment model. What do I mean by that? A lot of times, product teams have this giant backlog of tickets in Jira. Giant backlog. We don't know how these things got in there. They may have gotten there over 12 months ago. We have tons of things we need to be working on, or we think we need to be working on. But we do not have defined themes for our roadmap where we want to put our investment. So my third advice to my new CPOs or heads of product is define your themes that are aligned to your company OKRs, your rocks, your initiatives, or the value creation themes, because we have those at a high level, and then we have our product goals, right? So make sure that they're mapped. And once you know what your themes are, be prescriptive with your engineering counterpart, the CTO. For example, I need to be spending 20% of my engineering efforts to build migration tooling because migration is a key theme for this year. Or I need to be putting in 25% of my efforts on retention. So I need to spend dollars on hygiene and customer sentiment because retention has been an issue. Or I need to be spending 40% or 60%. I'm thinking Jeffrey Moore, Jim. So 60% of my efforts on differentiation, crossing the chasm. Yep. We usually don't have that luxury, unfortunately.
Yeah, we don't. Nope.
Reference to crossing the chasm. I'm also a big fan. And basically be prescriptive about how much you want to invest in those themes, and don't let this stuff happen to you. Be in the driver's seat with a plan as to how much you want to spend in each theme. Those are my three pieces of advice to my.
I love those. Yep. And that number two one, I think, is so often, they can help you with that product P&L. But what I found when I was doing it is the fact that I could go to, the senior leadership team meeting with a business case. And when the CFO said, "Oh, who calculated those numbers?" And I say, "Oh, your guy did, your director of FP&A did." They're like, "Oh, okay, those numbers are good." Right. And same with going to a board with PE people on it. And it is the ability to have finance back up what you're talking about is so valuable. And again, you're a GM. You should have a finance person. So I love that. Hitesh, Your advice.
I think any hit all the right points, but I'll add to it, right? So I think one of the things that I learned as I came into PE and as I, when I hired a PE lead is, first of all, understand what is the value creation thesis. Why did the PE firm invest in this company, and what is that they think is going to create value? Is it to go up market? Is it to do tuck-ins? Is it to do new product creation? What is the value creation thesis? Understand that really well. Number two is understand the current state of the organization, right? What I mean, let's say you want to run a marathon, doctor first texts, are you able to run? Are you able to recover? So the basic metrics, do they release every 6 months or every 3 weeks? How many bugs do they have? Just to get a sense of the current capability of the team on the engineering side and the product side. When's the last time they talked to a customer? Get a sense of that. Then number three is very quickly figure out what is the current problem, in the sense of, is it a retention problem? Is it a usage problem? Is it an engagement problem? Is it a growth problem? Where is sales focusing its efforts on? What is the current segment they are tracking? Is the ICP aligned with what the sales is selling and what the product is being built for, right? And what is the current product map? Like Annie said, if I look at the current product, where are we investing? Where is it growing? And what is the profit in each part of your product portfolio? And then stop there and then map a very simple strategy, which brings back to Annie's point of how much are you going to, innovate, operate, and, KTLO, keeping the lights on.
Yeah.
After having done that, I think the biggest thing that you should do is to focus on getting people under you understand that strategy, and then work this through with sales and with engineering to build out the first leg. So, my end of first 3 months, my thing is, do you have a strategy? However 80% done it is, do you have 3 or 4 metrics you want to track for this first quarter, the second half, and this year? And then do you know what investment and what ROI will come? That, to me, if you can get that done, is first board meeting, 3 slides.
Yeah, I love it. And I'm going to point a little thing here. And I was hoping it would go this way, but all 3 of you said you came from technical backgrounds, although I think Annie moved into the product side a little quicker than Jim or Hitesh. The fact that all these people with engineering and technical backgrounds, it's always coming down to the GM of it, the P&L, the profits, and where are we going? And, I love that. I mean, because that's where I live from. But sort of side note context, Jim, same question.
Well, so, I always pound the table on this. So at the highest level, the whole idea of value creation plan from PE is so stuffed shirt. We're so full of crap. So let's not put too much like, hey guy, you've been running your business for 20 years. I'm going to come in 2 seconds. This is how we're going to, that to me, that is such hubris. It's ridiculous. Now we've seen a lot more companies. So an individual company knows what they know really well. All 3 of us have seen lots of different companies. So that's the value, is bringing another perspective, and that we can't be fired. What is my job? My job is to take a bullet. I can ask any stupid question I want, and I can suggest a really stupid strategy, and my portfolio company, tells me I'm full of it, right? That I don't want to ask employees of these companies to put their careers on the line fighting for something. That's my job, right? So you can't get rid of me because we own the company, right? So that's part of what we have to do is, as good product managers is, especially from the outside, I can ask these questions and it's not going to hurt my career, not going to get fired, and I guarantee you when I say something super stupid, the portfolio company comes up with a really good idea based on how stupid my suggestion was, right? But that sparks the conversation that everything's on the table. Like, let's just ask about everything. Like there's no sacred cows here, right? But when we come in with this, like, hey, value creation plan, it sounds good to investors. They love to hear stuff like that. But the reality on the ground, as I'm sure Andy and Hitesh know, is much harder. It's much harder than the PowerPoint presentation that the PE firm told their investors versus what it takes to actually do the job.
I'm going to just sort of do an add-on question. This is sort of like the question after the question mark, because Hitesh talked about the board deck. I talk to a lot of new product leaders, whether at portfolio companies, whether it's they've just been acquired or they've been brought on, who's never worked with a PE board. What's your advice to a product leader who has to present to a board meeting? Hitesh had his sort of, I liked his approach to that first 3 months and where they get to it. But is there that can be an intimidating place for somebody, especially if they haven't been at that senior level presenting that type of stuff. Just any pointers or advice, Annie?
Yeah, I like to break it up in 3 sections. Where we are today, what is our product vision? How are we funding the product vision, and what are the incremental milestones to get there? What is our ways of working and process and KPIs that we are going to measure the success of those milestones? And then finally, do we have the people and skill set to accomplish those milestones? The KPIs, I have a set of financial KPIs and a set of product-oriented KPIs that I would recommend to a CPO to show. So you got your 3-year vision, your milestones, your KPIs to measure success, your processes, and your people. That's how I would break up my presentation to the board.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Annie. Jim, thoughts?
Yeah, we don't do it that way because for 2 reasons. One, if you have multiple investors, it's really difficult because then there's a lot of what I call associate theater, with associates trying to ask the gotcha questions, and people don't want to dig into the details. So we run product strategy reviews on a quarterly basis. That is a full run through of the product outside of the board meeting. Any of the board people can come, but the idea is what ends up in the board deck is a summary of that, because I don't want to cut that conversation short. Hitesh and Annie will tell you, we know this is true. If you would put us in the soundproof booth, on the Newlywed Game, we asked Jim his answer. Here's the board people go right to the financial slides in any board deck. It's like, hey, what do the numbers look like? And if the numbers look good, everybody stops talking about anything else, right? That's not going to get us anywhere.
Exactly.
The numbers today don't help you tomorrow. And I think they always cut that stuff short. So we tried to jam it in. We found it just didn't work. So carving out a full day or half a day for a PSR ahead of a board meeting gives us at least the ability to uncover all that stuff. That what should we be going to the board with? I want my guys to go to the board with, I have these 3 questions for you, board. I need your help on this. We're thinking of this, what should we do? It should be strategic questions, not, going through all the details of this is how many sprints we ran. This is how many. Most of the board people are not going to be interested in that. And hopefully if you have a decent board, there's real value in that board. And so I want real value coming out of them, which is I want to get in front of them with the exact questions we have. And if we run a little product strategy review, all the team knows these are the questions that I want the board to answer on, whether it's putting more, Andy will tell you if we got a good opportunity to capture a segment of the market, the PE firm may say, hey, let's throw some gas on that fire, right? Let's add some engineering talent. Let's bring this product, to market quicker. If we understand that there's an opportunity that we're missing, the board wants to weigh in on those kind of decisions, but they need the facts to do it, right?
Yeah,
totally.
I love that.
Go ahead. No, I sorry, Annie, go ahead.
I was going to say that, totally agree with the right level of detail should be presented, not the number of sprints or sprint level detail. By KPIs, I mean more overarching KPIs, financial, and also
totally
percentage of cycle goals that are much higher level, and talk about your big things like launch readiness programs, not how many times a day do you deploy code into production, right? That's
what I like are those leading indicators. If you can tie your product usage and that type of stuff to, hey, when we see an increase in this, our retention rate goes up, our usage goes up. Exactly. To me, it's those connectors so they can understand the role the product is playing in those great financials, hopefully, that they're seeing.
Yeah. So I think, so I have a similar philosophy as Jim. When I came in, I had, vision, mission, strategy, objective, that did not fly with a lot of PE teams. Some of them, yes, were interested, because in the end, as Jim said, looking like we're investing this many dollars, we wanted this much sales. Where is the missing piece, right? The interest comes in when you say, oh, we had a planned product release. It did not happen. We are delayed by a month, 2 months. Why? What is the problem? Or problem is, do we don't have the right team? Do the right tools? Did we do discovery wrong? What is the problem? We are slow. We were expecting 4 new releases of new products this year. We've done only 2. Why are we slow? So those overarching questions is what the board is interested in. They're not interested in the nitty gritties. And we do a very similar model. I try to do a model of QBR, which I learned from my prior days, like quarterly business reviews for product and technology per se. So outside the board meeting, specifically just for product and engineering. And there the metrics are, I would say, fit for purpose, in the sense that in certain portfolio, the focus is cloud migration. So the metrics is about cost and usage and migration. In some portfolio companies, it's about, existing feature usage enhancement. So it's fit for purpose metric.
Yeah.
But in the end, some of the core themes is, what are we investing in? Are we delivering in the right speed? When we're delivering, are we seeing the sales outcome? And then what else is on the horizon? I think these 4 things is what is specifically meant for the board meeting, the board deck. But beyond that is all in the QBR, quarterly business review.
Yeah.
You can go much detailed, and again, fit for purpose based on the portfolio company's current state or the current need or the current status.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Hitesh. I think I'm going to make this, I always end with a question on what's your biggest learning or takeaway. So hopefully you guys are getting as much out of this as I am from learning from each other. So we'll end with that. Looking at the time, trying to figure it out. I've got, I think, one question before that. What's your advice to another PE firm who's exploring adding product management to value creation operating partners? My view is there's probably less than 25% of the firms out there, probably less than 10% who have product management as a focus. If another firm was coming to you saying, hey, you guys are doing this, why should we think about adding an operating partner or value creation consultant focused on product? I'll start with Hitesh, because I haven't started with you on any of these.
Yeah, I think, so I think it's very hard for a lot of PE to understand the need for it, because product management is both a science and an art, right? So when I hire somebody and say they have great product sense, and my counterpart asks, like, what do you mean by that, Hitesh? Well, so I can't explain that, but I did understand that while speaking to them when we're discussing a product or we're discussing Google Maps, right? So it's part art, part science. The PE world tries to put everything into numbers, and you cannot bring everything in product management into numbers. So the PE firms that are purely number oriented will not appreciate or not understand the need for product management. Is the firms that have gone a little beyond the numbers, and even when they're optimizing sales and they're looking at sales productivity, and they realize there is a difference in productivity based on how somebody sells a product, how the product was built, and so on. So there is, I would say, not every PE firm is right for having this muscle in, and not every PE firm, when they have this muscle, will use it properly either.
Yeah.
Right. So I don't know if I answered your question, Grant, but
no.
that's the learnings that I've had over the last couple of years in the PE world.
I'm going to draw the analog to what Jim said earlier about one of the biggest problems he sees is the difference between a market and a market segment. The reality is not every private equity firm is going to get the value of operating partners and value creation teams and that type of stuff, right? Yeah. They're very much a financial engineering, as Andy talked about earlier. And it's about, this. I think that is changing. I think to Andy's point earlier, we need to start finding more ways. And especially in an interest rate, with what's going on, and you need to find ways to do that. So I don't think there'll ever be everyone will have it. I think, but I do feel like those who haven't really focused on product, there's a real opportunity for them to see this as they saw sales or IT in years before, or marketing and branding. I feel like there's some firms I watch and it's like they make the acquisition and boy, you can see the brand changes and then the marketing changes and then the sales team changes. And it's like a rote playbook. And I think product should be part of that. So it makes a ton of sense. Annie, I'll go to you next. Your thoughts. What's your advice?
Well, I think product management is probably one of few roles that it can heavily impact EBITDA and ARR growth, both, with the decisions that we make on a day-to-day basis, right? So in product management, we end up making a lot of decisions. Those decisions can either help us on the growth side or they can help us on the product margin side. Those are the two key metrics that are looked at, in addition to lots of others, but very important for exits. So why should a PE firm care? Because essentially we touch those two metrics in product management every day, or we can impact those two metrics every day. We can help our companies grow organically by writing business cases for new, cool, differentiating capabilities and contribute to that 60% crossing the chasm core differentiation. Or we can improve our EBITDA by improving our cloud margins, bringing a product into a multi-tenant environment and improving our cloud margins. So how we spend our resources on the engineering side is critical to those two metrics, and those two metrics are critical to a successful exit. That's how I would sum it up.
I had mentioned the ebook that Product Growth Leaders just published on product management being the next great value creation. And one of the things that made me write that, I was talking to a guy who advises, who CEO of a firm that works with private equity portfolio companies. And he said their whole focus is on customer lifetime value, increasing retention, increase average revenue per customer, and reach the new personas. I'm like, those are all product management things, right? It's where we need to play.
Absolutely.
Jim?
Yeah, I mean, I think what's interesting, Grant, is look at it a slightly different way. So you got three people on this call that have really unusual resumes, right? And I think that's the problem in just saying, hey, I'm a PE firm. I'm going to hire a really good product manager. So I'm going to go to Procter & Gamble and hire a great product manager, and they're going to add value in the portfolio. They're not. So look at the three of us. We understand engineering, we understand product. We may not be gurus in any one of those. And the third leg of that stool is, and we understand how PE works and how to translate it into PE speak. That's, I think, one of the fundamental problems. If you're a PE firm and you're going to go hire a great product manager, they're not going to be successful. They don't understand partner dynamics. I have to get to the level of this partner did this deal, this partner did that deal. Like, you have to understand the mechanics behind the deals. You have to understand, when you're a product person talking engineering and engineering tells me some bullshit that, like, no, yeah, it's not going to take that long. I've written code myself. Like, if you're in the, sounds good. You know enough to say, come on, guys, that's not true, right?
Yeah.
I think that's the problem. It's not that it's not useful. It's super useful. I would make the argument that if you had to hire one person, in our experience as an operating partner, you should pick somebody who understands product. Like, that's what you should do, right? Yeah. There's tons of sales consultants out there. There's tons of, I'm saying you should use those, but product person, the problem is getting the right product background. Right?
It's almost a purple squirrel where you want a little bit of tech, a little bit of business savvy in understanding the private equity value creation approach and how to work with partners. I think that's very valid, that it's finding the right person, right?
Yeah.
It's not
but I think Jim said something that I want to reemphasize. It's having the universal translator. That's key. I know great product people who will never do well in PE, myself included. When I came in, I had to change my language, right? Yeah. The Silicon Valley language doesn't resonate in the PE world. You can't. Nope, so you need to have the universal translator so that if you translate in the terms that the PE is interested in knowing. So that is the key.
Completely and totally. I mean, Rich Mironoff, we've had on multiple times, and he always talks about the language of the boardroom and how product needs to speak in the language of the boardroom. I think that's closer to private equity. We're got a few minutes left. The last question is, what's your biggest learning or takeaway? Hopefully you guys have gained from what each other have been talking about. I doubt you've learned anything from me, but from this call, biggest learning or takeaway, and thank you for taking your time with it. Annie, biggest learning or takeaway?
Well, one of my takeaways is that I want to definitely connect with Hitesh and Jim and pick their brains more. I love, Jim alluded to crossing the chasm. It's still very relevant today, that book. And I love Hitesh's reference to the agile theater and how it can become process for the sake of process and not really moving the needle. So we should just be diligent and identify that quickly and make sure that everything we do is for a key outcome, for the company, not just process for the sake of process. So I love these two takeaways.
I love it. Thank you so much. Hitesh.
Yeah, I think my takeaway is, one takeaway is that, like, there is no one size fit all product management for the PE companies, right? That's one takeaway. I think the fact that all three of us came into it very differently and very coincidentally also speaks to the fact that it is something that the PE world is stumbling in, and people like us will also stumble in. Yeah. And Jim, I think I have heard, now I remember where your voice is from a podcast that I heard. Now I know, now, and there's a jingle that is growing in my mind. Like, where have I heard this voice? Like, there's a jingle.
Private Equity Funcast.
Yeah, please do not operate heavy machinery when you are listening to this podcast. I don't want to be hurt.
I think when I first got into THL, I was looking at can I learn more about operating product? That's when I remember your voice from. So now I can put a name to a face.
Yeah, well, Devin and I, when we started that, he actually got to interview Nassim Taleb, who wrote The Black Swan this week, based on the podcast. So it was, he considers his life successful now because he got.
Isn't that based on the panel he's doing in Las Vegas or something like that?
No, that's a completely different panel. That's DealMax. Yeah, so Paul and Devin. Paul's subbing in for me. I'm still. I don't have quite the depth perception, so I don't want to be on a stage where I may step off the end of it. Still getting used to having one eye here, so slow but sure.
And one thing, good news, Hitesh and Annie, you guys are on the calendar invite. You now have emails for each other, so please do make those conversations. And I know that I've introduced you guys to other people before, like Ben and all. Jim, your takeaway, your learning?
Yeah, you know what's really interesting is it's good that we all are doing some similar things, in a vacuum, which is good, which means you're sort of on the right path. But it also brings to mind those of us doing this work on the PE side, getting together outside of those big PE operating executive forums, which I find are a waste of time. It's basically, you go to those things, you're a big target for every consultant who wants to sell you something. It's a waste of time, right? But the small groups of us like this is a very useful conversation because hey, this is what I'm doing. Like, does it make sense at all? And how do you see it, and getting a different opinion? And I think Hitesh is right. Part of this is just improving the translation vocabulary, so you know how to talk to the portfolio companies, the board, and your PE partners about why we're doing what we're doing.
Love it. I think the biggest takeaway for me, my first thought was leaning into Annie with the whole GM, and because that's just resonates with me and Steve and the way that we approach product management as a business and strategic role. But I think the last part, when we start talking about advice to a PE firm that might be considering it, is, boy, it's not easy, right? To do this, you guys do have a unique set of skills and experiences that are enabling you, although different, to the Hitesh's point, a little coincidentally, some similarity, that there's some purple squirrel here. And so I really appreciate this. Whatever we can do to help with that. Ben and I have talked about, doing stuff like this for his portfolio product leaders, and maybe we do some stuff with each other. So Annie, Hitesh, Jim, so good to have you guys participate in this. I thank you so much. And we are going to do a part 2 of this at some point. I don't have it on the calendar, which is going to be heads of product from portfolio companies to sort of get their view on it. It probably be some overlap, but it's probably going to be a little places where it's a little different. So once we get that scheduled, we'll put it out there. And thank you guys for participating in this. And everybody have a great weekend. Jim, stay warm here.
I hope so. Good luck to your wife on opening day.
Yeah. Take care, everybody. Have a great weekend.
All right.
Bye.
See you guys. Thank you. Bye.